And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. Now, I thought about lighting a candle for a little visual tonight in honor of Metazoo, but then I realized I'm surrounded by a bunch of cardboard, so I probably don't want any open flames around me. But I'm conflicted. I'm gonna tell you why I'm conflicted. I think a lot of people out there, I think they kind of want me to dance on Metazoo's grave a little bit because I'm just gonna give a little backstory in case you guys don't know. But me on this channel, I've been one of the most critical people towards Metazoo. And I was critical towards Metazoo before it was cool to be critical towards Metazoo. And right before this live started, I went back and I watched one of my old lives that I had. I believe it was the first time I actually ever had Dan Ketchum collectibles on my channel. This is really going back in time. And I went back and I watched it. And the date of the video was January 27th, 2021. January 27th, 2022. So it was exactly 2 years ago from today. And during that video, me and Dan had conversations. I talked about why I didn't like Metazoo. He talked about why he did like Metazoo. It was pretty wild to listen to some of the conversations we were having. At the time, the Metazoo Kickstarter booster boxes were selling strong at $9,000. He had talked about how he owned 4 Kickstarters at one point, how he bought his original Kickstarter booster box at $2,000, how he sold a few of them at $4,500 and talked about them as being these great plays. Dan hadn't gotten any sort of distributing price in with Metazoo. He wasn't even selling Metazoo at the time. The only product he had sold for Metazoo was the Kickstarter booster box. And me and him went back and forth, and we talked about a lot of stuff in that video. But it's so weird going back and watching that video, because even in that video, I asked Dan in the video, I said, do you know who Cool Trainer Ryan is? I talk about CTR in the video. This is way before the podcast, before he'd even started redoing his channel. I know he already had the channel. Real quick, shout out to number one mod in the game, Drew. Appreciate you dropping the 10 gifted memberships. But, just talking to Dan, and the reason why I say CTR is because going back, CTR was one of the more vocal people talking about why he didn't like Metazoo either. If you go back to the podcast with me, myself, and with me, Rattle, and CTR, and he talks about it during the live as one of the things that was happening, and there was some whispers of it, was that a lot of these cards were being obviously printed in China, but there was a potential for a lot of really good proxies coming out for Metazoo. And one of the reasons you had really good proxies is because Metazoo had the great idea of, let's upload a bunch of high-res scans for their new cards. So anytime you have super, super high-res scans, dropped onto the internet, it was really easy for people to make fakes. The fakes for the Metazoo market never really went crazy because luckily the prices of the cards never really made it worth it for those fakes to come out. But a lot of them were pretty good fakes, and it was something that people had whispers about, was the Metazoo fakes, but it never really caught traction. I didn't really hear a lot of people continue that conversation. But looking back on Metazoo, one of the things that I had the strongest pushback for is there was just a group of people that were in the Metazoo hobby. Just, they had the ultimate blinders on. They didn't want to see any of the faults that existed in Metazoo. And to be honest with you, at the time, they're always right until they're wrong. And what I mean by that is, when Metazoo was released, going back to that live with Dan, and I'm probably going to talk about it a few times, but I talk about remember seeing Kickstarter booster boxes selling for $500. I talk in that live with Dan how I just think that Rudy was pumping Metazoo like crazy. And I think a lot of people were just FOMOing into Metazoo for the sole reason of they want to make money. I didn't believe that they believed in the TCG or the IP at all. All they cared about was they saw a vehicle for a quote-unquote investment, and an investment in cardboard. So they went after Metazoo really, really hard. And one of the debate points me and Dan had in that video was, I talked about it as it had the backwards like collectability and investability Pokemon did. And what I mean by that is in the video, I said Pokemon went through a, you know, TCG was released. A bunch of kids got into that card game. We were the ones that were buying it up. And then we turned this TCG, a trading card game, we as adults and as we got older, we decided to turn this into like an asset class. So in a way, it went very organic. That it was a bunch of kids playing this game. People loved the IP. They loved the characters. They loved everything about it, and that's what Pokemon had going for it. It had this, and it's a trading card game. It had that playability. It had all the fundamentals built into it. And then as we got older, we decided to change what it was, and then we turned it into some investment or some, actual tangible asset. That was on us. We were to blame for that. Now, MetaZoo, on the other hand, even though I feel Pokemon had that organic growth, MetaZoo started as the complete opposite, where Pokemon started as this kids game and organic hype and, people loving the IP. MetaZoo started as an investable TCG. And Mike Waddell, never really cared for the guy, but one of the things he did real early on, there was real early videos where he opened up a MetaZoo Kickstarter box, and one of the things he was talking about was grading cards. And not only was he talking about grading cards, he was talking about grading cards to increase the value of the cards. And that's not something you really want to hear from the owner of the game. And one of the things a lot of people always talked about, they always complimented that guy Mike Waddell because he had a really good business acumen, and he was a really smart businessman, and he knew what he was doing. I heard people say that until they were blue in the face. But all that meant was people were hoping that he would be able to lead MetaZoo into making them money. That all it ever boiled down to. And MetaZoo, I was never into MetaZoo. I did just recently buy some MetaZoo today because UFO first edition booster boxes are on TCG Player for $16. So I said, you know what? I love dead TCGs. If you know anything about me, I love dead TCGs. Right to the corner off screen is a big pile of dead TCGs. I love dead TCGs. Now that MetaZoo is a dead TCG, plus the fact that booster boxes are selling sub $20, $16, $16 booster boxes, that's right in my wheelhouse for dead TCGs. Yum, 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 yum. I'll just gobble all those up. But one of the things I didn't love about MetaZoo was it almost like they were too rewarding to their very, very early adapters of the card game, which I think you need a fine balance of that. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you should always be rewarding to the people that support you at the beginning. And while I do believe that is true, I feel like even though people were already rewarded because those Kickstarter booster boxes went up to crazy prices, what MetaZoo started to do really, really quickly is they started to build artificial barriers for people that would, not just be early adapters, early supporters, but really what they were doing was building walls to people that had big pockets and could start to spend a lot of money. And one of the glaring examples of that were the MetaZoo NFTs. You don't want a game coming out with NFTs because you feel like NFTs should be really, really far down the line and more or less just something in the super far distant future and hopefully something you never see. But MetaZoo really quickly were rolling out NFTs, and it all felt like money grabs. That's how it felt to me watching it from the outside looking in. And then a lot of these NFTs, they were 1 out of 100, and if you backed the NFT, eventually you would get the actual physical representation of that NFT in an actual card form. It would be 1 out of 100. And then there was all the problems going on with the MetaZoo Discord, where the MetaZoo Discord was being ruled with an iron fist, where if anybody ever said anything even slightly derogatory or slightly negative towards MetaZoo, they were instantly banned from that Discord. And that was a lot of concerns a lot of people had. So the real early on MetaZoo community started to, any sort of concerns people had, all those voices were really, really quickly weeded out. And I know we live in the niches. We live in the niches of the niches, I should say. I want you to really think hard about this. Remove yourself from this YouTube community. Remove yourself from this area and remove yourself from Collecticons. Do you know anyone in your personal life that knew what MetaZoo was? Probably not. And the way MetaZoo made it sound like they were operating with these really crazy prize pools for player support and stuff, every step of the way it just felt more and more just non-organic. And you don't want that. You want your entire growth model to be organic. And MetaZoo, for a while, they were doing really, really well. There was a lot of hype, and they capitalized so poorly on it. A perfect example of that would be Wilderness booster boxes. The Wilderness booster box debacle, you want to call it, where they ramped up print runs to 100,000 booster boxes. And all that screamed to me at the time was that screamed greediness, because they didn't have a true understanding of what the actual demand for that product was. So they single-handedly in that one product more or less like destroyed whatever demand was like that existed in their products, because now they just flooded the market with way too much stuff. And I get it. Don't let me fool you. I understand that it is hard to really like be able to delicately navigate print runs, especially for products like this. But, you know, you can say what you want about Rudy. Rudy always brings up great examples that print runs will make or break games. And if a game wants to be like made and they want to continue a longevity of success, one of the things they need to do is never get greedy, and they need to pull back print runs. We're seeing it happen right now. I'm not going to get into other TCGs really, but you know, there will be learnings from MetaZoo. I don't want to. The reason why I don't want to get into, I mean, I'll mention them real quick. You know, like Disney Lorcana comes to a lot of people's minds. One Piece, Dragon Ball Z. You know, card games like this that are probably on people's brains. And in later videos, we will touch on these other TCGs and more or less not just touch on them, but is there anything we could learn from MetaZoo? Because if anything, MetaZoo was the ultimate canary in the coal mine for a lot of people. And that real question of, well, what does it take to really, really kill a game? And can we watch it play out real time? And, you know, there was just so many things that happened at the end for MetaZoo. But they had already, in a way, like, signed away their own fate. I'm telling you, it goes back to Wilderness. It goes back to 100,000 booster boxes for a print run. And if a game wants to stick around, and it wants to, you know, help both the player base and help both that investor base, it is a really, really, like, fine line to walk. And MetaZoo, I just feel, wasn't able to do it. They got greedy, they saw dollar amounts, and they just pumped out a ton of product. They never should have pumped out a ton of product. They should have held back print numbers as best as they could. And even if that means, and I get it, this is where you run into that weird area, because now people that have, you know, they sell MetaZoo, they sell it at a distribution, you know, level, or they're getting their product from MetaZoo, or maybe they have that partner pricing or those partner networks. Those people, if there is money to be made, they're always going to be like knocking on MetaZoo's door saying, hey, listen, I'm selling out on all the stuff you're giving me. You got to give me more. I want more. I want more. I want more, because I could sell it. I can make money. I'm a partner. Give me more product. Now, that's why it's really hard for a company to just look at those people and pretty much sadly say, no, we're not giving you any more product. The print runs are what they are. There's not going to be, you know, multiple reprints of this, or if there are going to be reprints, it's going to be very, very small reprints. They're not even going to be anywhere as close to that initial allocation. And then we're going to, you know, learn from this, and then we're going to continue to move on and just keep marching and keep pumping out sets. And it is what it is, because now what you do is, in a way, as tough it is to say, it creates a little bit of that artificial scarcity. And the way it's artificial scarcity is because the company knows it can print more, they choose not to, and they choose to just continue marching the game along. You know, it is in a way the Pokemon business model. Now, to say Pokemon business model is the amount of product that Pokemon sells. Trust me, if if Pokemon ever decide to only make 100,000 booster boxes of a set, cards overnight would be thousands of dollars each, because the market is just that much, is that just that large in Pokemon. It's just however many multiples greater than anything MetaZoo ever saw. But one of the things that Pokemon does is, while yes, we do see Pokemon go back and reprint stuff, and we do see more waves of stuff, and we do see Pokemon kill some products, shout out the Shine and Fates, for the most part, Pokemon has a very good track record of not really going back and killing their sets. And one of the reasons that they don't kill their sets is because Pokemon is a freight train that keeps marching down the rails. It is an absolute train, because there's just more and more sets in the future, and Pokemon does not stop. Now, what happened with MetaZoo was they just weren't able to navigate that. And I think we saw them try at the end. They tried the cut down print runs. And then, there was a lot of what I consider like poor choices, for MetaZoo. And one of those was the Hello Kitty collab. Listen, I had to sit on the other side of a lot of conversations and hear people talk about how Hello Kitty was one of the biggest IPs in the entire world, and that people care about Hello Kitty so much. And it wasn't there for me. I didn't see it. When I thought of MetaZoo, I thought of, I guess it's kind of in the name, cryptids, right? Like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, Mothman. None of them really scream like Hello Kitty type vibes to it. So when they went after that Hello Kitty collab, I never understood it. And then what happened super, super early on? Well, you had that product selling on TCG Player, and then a lot of people did the pre-orders, and then instantly overnight they just weren't able to sell enough of this product because the price points were way too high. So TCG Player just overnight slashed that entire product line 50%. So now all the consumer confidence that was there for all the people that did the pre-orders, the people doing pre-orders for, Hello Kitty were probably the very few true believers in MetaZoo that was left in the market. There weren't many true believers left. And then to have their pre-orders be slashed 50%. Luckily, TCG Player did make right to all those people. They did refund them, so even if you did the pre-order price and after TCG Player slashed the price 50%, they refunded you that 50%, which, to be honest with you, TCG Player didn't have to do that. And for all the people that did happen to them, they should be thankful. But it just showed over and over and over again just a glaring weakness that was the MetaZoo market. And at the very beginning, when MetaZoo was on its hype train run, and it was really hard to argue with people because you were wrong, they were right. And when I say they were right, you had Kickstarter booster boxes selling for $9,000. Even though I thought that those prices were inflated, that nobody would want that product in the future, it didn't change the fact that at the time, I was wrong. I was wrong, because anybody that would make that comparison to me go, I don't know, PK, you might think MetaZoo's not a good game, but look at this Kickstarter booster box selling for $9,000, and look at the sale before that was $8,000, and the sale before that was $6,000 to $5,000 to $4,000, all the way back down to the $500 to $250, all the way back to when it was selling on the Kickstarter. And guess what? During that time, those arguments, I was always in the wrong, because the market was proving me wrong. And we can take this comparison to other games that are happening right now in the market too, where if there's anything to be learned from, and we'll talk about that again, like I said, on future videos. But one of the things that was so glaringly crazy was all the people that came out to defend MetaZoo at that time. If you said anything poor against MetaZoo, like, people just jumped down your throat like, oh, you're just trying to shit on MetaZoo because you're just trying to protect your investments because your investment is Pokemon. The only reason you don't like MetaZoo is because you don't want people to take their money out of Pokemon. You only want people to keep their money in Pokemon, because if that's the case, then your investments will keep going up. But you know in your heart of hearts that MetaZoo is the next great TCG and that it's going to make all this money. And the only thing you're doing is you're just protecting your investments. This is why we can't listen to people like this. PK doesn't know what he's talking about. Anybody else that was talking anything negative about MetaZoo, they do not know what they're talking about. They're selfish people. They were only looking out for their own investments because they're invested in Pokemon, and they do not want you buying any of this other stuff. So, other people, including myself, until we are blue in the face, can say, no, it has nothing to do with us protecting our investments in Pokemon. It has everything to do with us protecting your investments in MetaZoo, because I just didn't see that stuff, and I didn't see the longevity to it. But even though we were at the end of the day, and history now shows it to be true, that we were trying to protect those people that were just going in a way absolutely the definition of balls deep into MetaZoo, and they got destroyed over it. There was a lot of people lost a lot of money in MetaZoo. And I wish I could sit here and say like that the signs weren't there. The signs were there. In fact, there was more signs that MetaZoo was going to crash and burn than there were signs that MetaZoo wasn't going to crash and burn. And I know at the end it got really easy to kind of poke holes at MetaZoo, and to be honest with you, like I had a lot of opportunities, and of course I would get my pokes in here and there, but at the end, it almost seemed not fun to poke at MetaZoo anymore, because the writing was on the wall. It was very clear what they were doing. And the sad thing is the people that were bearish, they kind of showed how they felt. But the people that were bullish on MetaZoo, I had to watch it over and over and over again. Even when MetaZoo, just last month, they released their roadmap. And the year before, they released their roadmap for 2023. And every time I'd hear people talk about it, I'm not even that invested in this game. I'm not that interested in this game. I'm not that deep into this game. But I knew those roadmaps were BS. And everybody who was like reading this stuff knew it was BS. And it brings up that question, and it's going to be an age-old question. I don't know if we'll ever have like the true answer for it, but why release that roadmap in January anyways? And if you are releasing that roadmap, why was it so crazy aggressive? They weren't able to put out main expansion sets last year, but for this year they were talking about pumping out 3 sets, and they were talking about, getting these people all these promos, and they're going to get all their players paid back, and they were going to just do all this stuff in that roadmap. And fast forward, we're fast forwarding a year later, and it's now the end of the year after that roadmap was released. We're talking the matter of a few weeks later. And none of that came to be true, and now MetaZoo is just going to be, in a way, the thing of the dodo. We'll talk about MetaZoo for a long time coming. I think MetaZoo will be a great, like I said earlier, that canary in the coal mine. There's a lot to learn from MetaZoo. And to be honest with you, like, I think MetaZoo as a whole, like, if you were at some Harvard business class or Yale business class, I feel like this would be a great class for the day. Just talking about the right way and wrong way to, like, build, scale a company, promise things. Like, if you break it down to, like, for as good as MetaZoo was at one point, because it was. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and just dance all day on the grave. I'm going to be honest with you. There was a point with MetaZoo where there was a roadmap, or not a actual roadmap, but there was at a time in the history of MetaZoo that their future hadn't been written yet, and they could have steered that ship to the most beautiful, greenest pastures ever. Sadly, it was just so many missteps along the way, but there was a period of time that MetaZoo had everything going for it. Their Kickstarter, going crazy. Thousands of dollars for booster boxes. People standing in line at Collecticons for these, promo cards. Just, you name it. People were just fiending to the absolute craziest degree for MetaZoo. And, a lot of people, I feel like they had all this faith in Mike Waddell, and it just, the leadership wasn't there, but I will give MetaZoo its credit, where at least where I feel the credit is deserved. There was a period of time where MetaZoo had a possibility to be something absolutely amazing, and print runs were too big. They killed it. They could have kept it back. Now, this is where you're going to get into those real like questionable ethics of like artificial demand, artificial scarcity, and you know, really like supporting the player base. At the end, they stopped supporting the player base. I talked to MetaZoo, or I talked to MetaZoo. I talked to Basic Trainer for a lot of times. Basic Trainer is one of my absolute favorite people in this hobby, and one of the people who have been on this channel more than anybody else. And Basic swore up and down, told me how great MetaZoo was, how great these caster cups were, how many people were showing up to play, like the different metas for the deck, and then, MetaZoo was going to break the fourth wall, and they were going to do all this like crazy next level stuff that TCGs had never seen before. And the people that were playing the game, I feel like there was a little bit of passion to it, but at the end of the day, it was just so surface level deep. It didn't go deep enough. Like the true fan base for MetaZoo, I want to say they stopped being there, but I don't even think that's the case. I think the absolute true fan base of MetaZoo, really, I don't know if it ever truly existed. I think the sad reality of it is that the people that were really getting into MetaZoo, especially at the beginning, paying these absorbent prices for product, I think they were just looking at MetaZoo as a ticket out, as a way to make money, as this just golden ticket, because at the time, MetaZoo was released during the pandemic. And what was going on in the pandemics? Well, all trading card games were going crazy, but we saw what was happening with Pokemon. And a lot of the stuff that was really going crazy in price was the older stuff for Pokemon. And when I say older stuff, I'm talking like the Logan Paul first edition booster box breaks. Don't forget, Logan Paul, when he acquired his 6 booster boxes, he was paying $330,000 for some of those booster boxes. We were seeing all-time record sales for Charizard first editions and all these base set first edition holos, especially in 10s, were selling for crazy premiums. We saw pack prices for all this old stuff go crazy overnight. But now you got this huge barrier of entry. So people say, well, I can't go back and get this Pokemon stuff. It's too late. I've missed my opportunity for the first edition Shadowless stuff. It's out of my price range. I can't go buy a first edition booster box. Now prices have gone down, but what have they gone down to? $180,000. Logan Paul was paying $330,000. But for a lot of people, that ship had already sailed for them. They couldn't get those booster boxes. So they just see this new shiny thing, this new Kickstarter that has a lot of like hype around it. Prices for this product is going crazy. They go, well, I can't afford $330,000 for a first edition base set booster box for Pokemon, but maybe I could afford $5,000, $8,000, $9,000 for a Kickstarter booster box of MetaZoo, and now I'm just going to get in. I'm never going to open that product because I don't want to open it. I don't care about the cards inside it. I only care about that as a sealed product play. And there were crazy prices being sold. During that video where Dan joined my live again, January 27th, 2022, he talks about buying those 4 he buys 4 sample cards from Rusty. So what the sample cards was real early on the life cycle of MetaZoo. Mike Waddell sent out a lot of product to people that he considered like trading card game influencers. And one of those people that was a trading card game influencer was like TCA Game. And another person was PokeRev. PokeRev got a lot of product too. Probably still sitting in one of his closets somewhere, just collecting dust. But Mike Waddell had sent a lot of this product to people just to open, and Rusty TCA Gaming got 9 of the sample cards. He ended up just putting them away in a drawer, like just totally forgot about them. And then Dan Ketchumall Collectibles ended up buying 4 of the 9 sample cards. He got to choose which ones he wanted to purchase. He bought the more fan favorite like characters that Rusty had. But for those 4 sample cards that Dan purchased, he spent $16,000 for those 4 cards. That is $4,000 per sample card. And again, that is a sample card that Rusty more or less forgot he even owned because he just threw them in a random drawer and then forgot about it. And then the craziness, which was MetaZoo, went wild and people wanted these sample cards. They wanted these original 1 out of 100 cards and all the crazy hype that was surrounding it. But it was just, when you look back on it now and you start to really think about these prices that people were paying for some of the stuff, you got to ask yourself, think about how many years it took Pokemon to get to prices like that, where you can get, cards in the 4,000 plus range, and these sample cards for MetaZoo with an unestablished game and an unestablished trading card market, and just the fact that these things could sell for thousands of dollars and that there was buyers. You look at this stuff and you go, there's no way that this can be sustainable. You can't just have stuff selling for thousands and thousands. I mean, that was a product that was free. That was given to TCA Gaming for free just to highlight the game. Same thing as PokeRev got all his stuff. Just was given to him for free because they were trying to get the name of MetaZoo out there to these content creators. You can't have free products like this in the matter of a couple months sell for crazy, crazy premiums. And the problem is when people put those prices on and they started to say that, well, these sample cards are worth $4,000 a piece. The market wasn't proven enough. The market wasn't strong enough to keep those prices, in my opinion, strong enough. Now, this is where, this video and we out there, anybody that has ever been critical to MetaZoo, you're in a luxury position right now where you get to play Monday morning quarterback, and now you can look back on all this stuff and go, none of this stuff made sense. But the fact of the matter is, at the time, I was wrong. You were wrong. If you were talking shit about MetaZoo at the time, I was wrong, you were wrong, because, sample packs were selling for $4,000 a piece for sample cards. We were in the wrong because the market was proving us wrong. And it's only because time has continued the tick, and I've talked about it. There's only one person in the history of trading card games that is undefeated, and that is not me, that is not you, that is Father Time. And just because time is now on our side, and time has shown that demand is... Sneezed. Shout out to Professor Oak for the sneeze. But it's just time now. So we get to play this Monday morning quarterback and look back on this stuff, but it's just, oh, that sneeze really got me. Alright, so I got to the point in the video where I just kind of want to talk about, there's a lot to digest with MetaZoo and just one day, and just them, pretty much saying, I give up. It's going to be fascinating as we look back on it in 3 months from now, and then a year from now, and 2 years from now, and if we're still talking about this in 5 years or 10 years from now. It'll be fascinating when we look back on it and we look at how crazy the market was at the time. And like I said, you can't... And it... So I looked over in the chat real quick, and people are talking about MetaZoo as being a rug pull, right? And it always felt like that to me, but it felt like a rug pull because of how quickly they just ramped up print numbers. And like I said, with the Wilderness booster boxes, it just felt like, in a way, a rug pull, because I feel like if MetaZoo wanted to, they could have kept the game strong, but they would have had to limit print numbers. And by limiting print numbers, it's that sole reality is they're just not going to make enough money. So that's why I think for a lot of people it probably has that rug pull feel to it, because if you do believe that there was some demand towards MetaZoo, maybe there wasn't as much demand as maybe a lot of people like to think there was or like to pretend like there was. But if there was still enough demand where, let's say, if you had a quarter of the print runs for some of this product, there would still be enough demand to eat up this stuff, that would trickle into that being a long, healthy market. So I feel like if people do feel like there is a rug pull sort of mentality to it, like that's where people could get that feeling for. It's like, if it wasn't a rug pull, why print so much of this stuff? Why do these TCG player dumps? Why set up all these deals with, certain people? Why hurt some people, not hurt other people? And then, at the time too, going back a few years ago, as I remember, everybody was talking about MetaZoo as they're going into Walmart, they're going into Target, that's gonna be the catalyst. It's gonna be the big box retail, and I just never felt that the IP was strong enough to go into a Walmart and Target. But then I also heard a lot of people saying, well, it's not just about Walmart and Target. The whole trading card game, which was, in my opinion, was the entire thing MetaZoo was built around, was being a trading card game. People would talk about, wait till the TV shows came out and the merchandise and the, stuffed animals and stuff. And it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. What do you mean the TV show and the comic books and the graphic novels and the plushies? And people were like, no, that's like the business like that they're trying to go in. They're not trying to, like the TCG is just one factor of that, and they're trying to do all these other things. And it's like, well, why don't you just focus on one of those things, which is the trading card game, which is literally what your entire business at the point was built around. Why don't you focus on that one thing before you start to bite off way more than you can chew with graphic novels and TV shows and plushies and all this other stuff that MetaZoo ended up doing? And then when you said that to people, people got very, very defensive. Like, you just don't understand. You don't understand, like, the growth of MetaZoo. It's not just about the TCG, it's about all these other things. And it's like, if you can't do one thing right, don't focus on these other things. So, all right. That's all I want to say. I'm going to just scroll up real quick. That was my 37-minute long MetaZoo rant. For those of you that like my rants, I'm glad I was able to entertain. For those that you hate those rants, I'm sorry. But I want to see what the chat's saying a little bit. I missed out a bunch. So Jimmy Blake said, through all this, I hope Basic Trainer didn't get burnt. He seemed like a really good guy. Basic is a really good guy, and I hope Basic didn't get burnt either. Fresh Tat said, CTR knows what's up. Yeah, he knew. CTR was one of the very, very early ones that I heard being super critical to MetaZoo. And, as time went on, CTR ended up, all his thoughts about MetaZoo ended up being true. Now, I think he was more worried about, like, the Alibaba and, like, fake cards and stuff. I think he was focused a little bit more on that, but he didn't see, like, the trajectory in this game. So, anytime you have that sort of, like, finger on the pulse when it comes to trading cards, and make no mistake about it, Ryan knows as much about trading cards as any person that's ever walked this earth. So the fact that he was real early on, he understood, he saw what was potentially bound to happen. And, at the time, like I said, you're going to be wrong until you're right. And in a lot of people's cases, they were wrong until they were right. And it took until MetaZoo to really start to implode and for a lot of people to be right. Kai said Dan sold me a Kickstarter box for $22K. He never recovered. I hope that's not true. Let's see. So Orniter said loads of creator pumped it on release. He said a lot of people were opening booster boxes on their channels. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say pumped it. They got free product. It was good advertising from Mike Waddell. Listen, I'm going to shit on MetaZoo a lot in this video, but anytime I have credit where credit's due, I'm going to be honest with you. One of the best things that they did from a marketing standpoint was to ship a lot of this product out to creators, because it got the name of that product in front of people that might have otherwise never heard of MetaZoo. So I'm not going to shit on somebody for good business marketing. Now, so, all right, we're back. Sorry, we had a little disconnection action for a second with the OBS, but we're back. Um, so Dan Catchmole Collectibles, he does have his MetaZoo promo. So I do own some MetaZoo cards. I do have a price floor with Dan, as long as Dan continues to hold that price floor. Uh, so Pokebreeder Max says they played into the stonking more than trying to create a playable TCG. I would feel like that is very true. Northwoods TCG said they built an IP on investors but never could really get their legs for the game compared to other successful TCGs, which started with players and growth collectors and investors. Yeah, so MetaZoo always had that backwards thing where, like you said, most games start with the player and the collectors, and then because of the players and collectors, because that growth and that demand grows, then you just in a way become an investor by default. I always talk about that as Pokemon. Any collector of Pokemon out there, because of what we saw happen in 2020, 2021, even if you were the most purest of collector, you became an investor by default because overnight what it felt like saw the prices of your collection exponentially increase. Where MetaZoo, it was always the reverse of that. It was always investor first, player second, collector probably last. So it just had a different feel to it. Let's see. The Godly Shade said Metazoo was a failure from the start, in his opinion. The issue was that it catered to investors more than collectors/players. So I just can't. I mean, I give Metazoo its credit. For me, Metazoo was not a failure at the start because we saw $9,000 Kickstarter booster boxes. Like, if that is a failure at the beginning, I would say no. But I think it wasn't a failure just because there was a lot of, like, demand that was in it. And those really early, like, first edition boxes just sold for so much money that I'm going to give Metazoo its credit. It wasn't a failure right from the start. It had the makings of a game that would fail in the future, but right at the beginning, it wasn't. And I'll give it Metazoo its credit. I'm telling you, I'm doing my best. So Pokemon Breeder Max says, what Kickstarter TCG isn't supported 90% by speculators? Again, credit where credit's due. The original Kickstarter for Metazoo didn't sell out. So while there was a lot of Kickstarter booster boxes, 2,500 of them. The original Kickstarter it wasn't fully funded where it sold out 100%. So because it wasn't fully funded and it didn't sell out 100%, it does make me believe that it wasn't all investors doing that real early Kickstarter. I do believe it was a lot of people just wanted to back a Kickstarter for a TCG that they were just going to plan on getting that product, open it up, maybe messing around with the TCG, but then the crazy prices happen. Now, if the MetaZoo Kickstarter was fully funded and it did sell out 100% at the beginning, then I would say it was just strictly investors. But because it didn't sell out that original Kickstarter, it wasn't fully funded, it wasn't fully backed, that's why I'm going to say there was probably a lot of players involved in that. Now, I mean, we could talk about Rudy. Make no mistake about it. The impact Rudy had on MetaZoo can never be understated. There is not one single person in this entire world, I'm not going to say on YouTube, I'm just going to say the entire world. There is no one person out there who had a bigger impact on MetaZoo than Rudy. Because of Rudy's promos, because of Rudy's reach on his channel, bringing Mike Waddell on. There was a lot of those videos where him and Mike were, in his living room or in his kitchen, just opening up Kickstarter booster boxes, talking about the game. Like, Rudy showcased Mike Waddell on his channel in a way that, to my knowledge, Rudy has never really showcased any other person like that. When was the last time you saw Rudy on a podcast? Probably never. I don't know if Rudy's ever actually been on a podcast, but the fact that it was Mike Waddell and Rudy more or less sitting on the couch, having a conversation. You never really got to see that side of Rudy. And because Rudy was showcasing Mike Waddell so much, Rudy had such a huge, huge impact on MetaZoo that it can never be understated. And to be honest with you, I think if Mike Waddell never had that Rudy relationship, I don't think MetaZoo really does much of anything, or at least it doesn't even get close to what it did. Like, Rudy really, really showed how powerful he was in the content creating sphere of how much he was able to elevate MetaZoo and get MetaZoo just out to the broad masses. And the way he was able to bundle his products and sell that product, like, make no mistake about it, Rudy cleaned up. Now, you can say do you feel bad for the people? I'm sure there's an argument you could say you feel bad for the people, but I think he saw a golden ticket in MetaZoo, and Rudy took advantage of it. And, like, I don't hate that because I don't think Rudy ever pretends that he's not in the business of selling cardboard. I feel like that's kind of the only thing Rudy ever talks about is the fact that he's just in the business of selling cardboard. So I struggle with getting mad at him over that. It's just, if there was no Rudy, MetaZoo is nothing like it is. And, yeah, Tundra says, the art is good in MetaZoo. It's a shame that people who ran it were so bad. Yeah, I mean, some of the artwork was hit or miss, but I like the fact that they were able to showcase, like, more up-and-coming artists, and especially at the beginning when, before all that shady stuff happened with the potential, like, alleged CEO and his dating an artist, and then he had favorable treatment for her, bringing her the Collecticon for signings, like, excluding all that, the fact that you could potentially go to a MetaZoo booth at a Collecticon and meet multiple artists, like, as a Pokemon fan, think of how hard it is just to be able to reach a Pokemon artist and to be able to get that signature. It's damn near impossible. And the thought of having an entire panel at a MetaZoo booth of the artist, like, that is awesome. Again, I'm going to do whatever I can in this video to give MetaZoo the credit where credit's due, because I've never really given MetaZoo any credit, so I can only dance on their grave so much. So, Catch 'em All Collectibles says, if MetaZoo only printed 25 or 50K, people would have crucified them for the underproduction and trying to stock it. Yes, people probably would have, but in order to be successful in the long term and have that longevity, I know people don't want to hear this, but underproduction, that is the way to go to keep a game like MetaZoo going for the long term. Is that artificial, like, scarcity. Just not printing stuff to absolute oblivion. Because what is the opposite effect of it? Yes, you might have people crucifying themselves because they kept print numbers low. But what was the other? What happened when they didn't do that? They crashed the prices of Wilderness booster boxes to sub $25. They killed an entire main expansion of the MetaZoo TCG. Like, shout out to Professor Oak. Like, the effects of not being crucified by people ended up, in a way, more or less killing the game. And I feel like if a lot of people go back and they really look for that catalyst, I think Wilderness was the beginning of the end. And you can make the argument that maybe the beginning of the end happened for MetaZoo way before then, but I would say one of the biggest glaring highlights of the beginning of end to MetaZoo was the Wilderness overproduction. And it just lost all consumer confidence in the product. It is what it is. And even the products that did have lower print runs, in comparison, again, all MetaZoo product is crash and burning right now, but in comparison, the ones that did have the tighter print runs, we're still seeing stronger price resistant points on those products than we are on other ones. Now, it's hard to say because it's really, really crashing and burning around. So the God Shady said the Catch 'em All Collector always goes, my biggest detest towards MetaZoo was more so the initial stonkage that I saw everywhere is that initially just threw me off. It seemed like a get-rich-quick scheme. I think that's beautifully well written. That's what it had the feeling of a get-rich-quick scheme for a lot of people, at least from the people looking at from the outside looking in. And it had that get-rich-quick scheme too. Is you got to go back. I don't even know if it's listed anymore, but that original MetaZoo opening with Mike Waddell when he's going through the cards and he's talking about the Mothman and he's comparing it to the base set Charizard and he's talking about it as being the most valuable card in the set and stuff. And that always rubbed me the wrong way because it should not be on Mike Waddell, the owner, to be dictating what the most expensive card in the set is going to be. That is something you need to let the consumer base dictate on their own. Like, why is the Charizard the most expensive card in Pokemon? Charizard's not the most expensive card in Pokemon because the Pokemon company dictated in base set that, hey, the Charizard is going to be the most expensive. No. All the Pokemon company did for that original base set was Charizards aren't seeded any less than any other card. It was you got 16 hollows in base set. One of those is a Machamp. It's in the 2-player starter deck. So we only have 15 hollows you can pull from a base set booster box because that Machamp's in the starter decks. And if you've ever seen an uncut sheet of base set hollows, there's no more Charizards or no less Charizards than any other card. The only reason that Charizard is expensive is because the consumer base decided that the Charizard was going to be the most expensive card because of the cartoon and because of how strong that card was. But Pokemon didn't force that on anybody. Real quick, Trio, T-R-A-A-O, I hope TCG, with the super chat. He said, appreciate the super chat. Let's see. So Pokemon Breeder Max says, I don't think you could even talk about MetaZoo and Pokemon in the same sentence. It's just not even close to similar. The only thing they have going for them is they're both cardboard TCGs. So just Bride and Nest says, people cared about Hello Kitty, but I think that pertained more to toys, stuffed animals, etc. I didn't see it. I don't see the demand for Hello Kitty. I mean, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, so Catch 'em All Collectibles is saying what I said. He's saying the Kickstarter didn't sell out. Yeah, I was mentioning that earlier. African Veteran 77 said a lot of stores bought Hello Kitty and are stuck with hundreds of boxes. Yeah, that's rough. I feel really bad for the people that really went heavily into MetaZoo. Catch 'em All Collectibles said they were in a damned if you do, damned if you don't spot. You know, I love a good Bart Simpson quote as much as the next person, but I don't know. I think they control their own destiny. I'll go to my grave believing that MetaZoo controlled its own destiny, that they were the ones that shot themselves in the foot. And we saw it happening over and over and over again. Just Byron had said, hopefully it gets picked up by another IP and pushes in the proper direction of cryptids and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think it would cost to acquire MetaZoo? Can we acquire MetaZoo? How much money do I need? Can I start a Kickstarter to fund me acquiring a former Kickstarter? Is that big brain? Did I just big brain it? Probably not, but that would be interesting. If I own MetaZoo, it would be, yeah, I would just artificially scarcity off the rip. I would shill it to the moon, 10,000 booster boxes for like whatever would be the MetaZoo I make. And then hopefully that the market is strong enough that I could eat up 10,000 booster boxes. So that would be like 5x what their original Kickstarter was. And then any product that didn't sell, any of those booster boxes, I would have to just sit on them and eat them meaning I wouldn't be able to flood them on the market. So let's just say that the hobby was only strong enough to eat up 3,500 booster boxes, right? So I would have to then sit on the other 6,500 just to keep the market inflated on those 3,500 that I did sell, until eventually, if the market kept going up, then I could start to trickle out some of those booster boxes. But I would run a badass MetaZoo. MetaZoo would be good. It would just be about like controlling the market, and you got to control the market for the long term. You have to have like, you have to believe in the game in the long run. And then too, like another thing you'd have to do is really keep an eye on the singles market. You can't have singles be too expensive to make the competitive play like unrealistic. The beautiful thing about MetaZoo is all cards from all sets are playable. It's not like Pokemon where you have stuff goes in and out of rotation. So because there's such a big backlog of playable MetaZoo cards, you don't really have to worry about like inadvertently destroying the actual playability of the TCG by like having the newer products have inflated prices, because there's such a huge drastic like amount of MetaZoo cards that already exist that are playable. So you don't really have to worry about that, but you do have to keep the playability aspect like in mind. And yeah, I think it's possible. Let's see. Pokemon Wonder, good to see you in there. Uh, I see people talking about Pow World. Yeah, maybe that's not a today's video, but that's a future video to talk about that. Uh, uh, Nexus, good to see you back in the chat, bud. Felipe de Sosa said, PK, what was MetaZoo's greatest mistake that sealed their fate? Was it Hello Kitty? No. MetaZoo's biggest mistake was Wilderness. And then before that, I think their biggest mistake was those NFT 1 of 100 cards. I think that was a huge misstep. I felt like the NFTs laid the groundwork for just something bad is right around the corner, because those NFTs screamed one thing and one thing only. We're in this for money. And if you can't afford to buy these NFTs, like, you can't afford to invest in this game. And that's not the way you can't do it like that. Even though I just talked about like limiting print runs and keeping secondary market prices strong, that is drastically different than going the NFT route, and which is just a definition of a money grab in my opinion. Again, everything I ever say in this video, always my opinion. Let's see. So Jordan said, I know it's easy to say the true fan base never existed based on the amount of speculators in the space, but as a true MetaZoo fan himself, I'm really disappointed right now. So there are some real true MetaZoo fans. I mentioned Basic Trainer. Basic Trainer, huge MetaZoo fan. I talked about MetaZoo with Basic Trainer more times than I could even count. So, I am excited to see, like Dan. I don't know where Dan falls. Dan liked MetaZoo. I think Dan liked MetaZoo. I think he sometimes, Dan, I love you, buddy. I love you. But I think sometimes, you gotta admit it, Dan, you had your blinders on just a little teeny bit. And I am interested to see what Dan's videos look like talking about this subject, because I think it will be interesting because he was a true believer. Be interested. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not trying to go after anybody. I'm just talking about MetaZoo. I need my day in the sun, okay? Everyone gets one. I get one. It took me 2 years to get my day in the sun. I'm getting my day in the sun. Just let me have it. And even that, I'm still trying to, like, throw MetaZoo a bone here and there. Trying to, like, any positive that was ever about MetaZoo, I'm trying to throw it in there. But give me my day in the sun. MetaZoo, they're no longer. Alright. So Ryan said the main reason MetaZoo died is because it had the worst customer service of all time. Mike Waddell is a goof and promised the world without coming close to delivering. I mean, when you say bad customer service, the only thing I could think of is the MetaZoo Discord, and I've heard just horror stories about what was going on in the MetaZoo Discord. Um, let's see. Ryan said when they banned all the diehard fans in the Discord for the most minor things, it was the beginning of the end. I can see that how that could definitely be the beginning of the end by banning your truest fans. And I think the problem is too is when you ban your truest fans is sometimes the people that are going to be the most vocal and sometimes will say the most meanest things. Sometimes they'll say it. There's always a group of people that will just say mean things to say mean things because they're just dicks through and through and they just can't help it. But there is another group of people that will say mean things because they actually care about the game. And because when they see bad things happening, they want to like make their voices heard. They want to be vocal saying, you are leading this TCG or you're leading this down the wrong path. And it's because we are passionate about this game, because we care about this game. We want our voices to be heard and we want to like portray our worries to you. And if that just goes on deaf ears by MetaZoo and it just goes to instant banning on the Discords and stuff, yeah, I can see how that could definitely have been the beginning of the end. And then, like I said, there's also the people on the other end that are just, will say mean things to say mean things just because. Let's see. Alright. Alright, I got to the bottom. Alright, guys, listen. I know this was a long-winded rant. I went for an hour. I was going to go for 30 minutes. I decided to go look at the chat. I think there's a lot of people are going to have a lot of strong feelings about this. This won't be the last time I talk about MetaZoo. I think my later videos I want to do like maybe now the comparisons. I real quickly mentioned Disney Lorcana and One Piece and Dragon Ball and we could even like lump in Sorcery TCG. I think Sorcery TCG being another Kickstarter game, I think that would be really good to like have the conversation of what can these games learn from MetaZoo? How? Because one of my favorite quotes in this, just not just hobby, is just life in general, is you need to learn from history. Otherwise, you're doomed to make the same mistakes. And I think that a lot of people can see the mistakes that MetaZoo made in order for them not to make the same mistakes, whether it is that One Piece or Lorcana or like a Sorcery. I think it's very important. And later videos, we'll talk more about that. And now we've seen all these warning signs, and we could even we'll start to do it too. Are we seeing any similar warning signs in these other TCGs? And we could just grow, and we could even dive into Pokemon. Are we seeing any sort of similarities on like some of the dangerous things that were happening in MetaZoo? Are we seeing that happen in Pokemon? I think this allows for a lot of conversations, a lot of debates to happen. And I have the luxury of long-form content that I could have this debate, whether it's one person watching this or I think at one point we had like 190 people watching this. So as long as one person's tuning in, it'll be worth it to have that conversation. But listen, guys, as always, appreciate every single one of you. I just see Basic Trainer finally tuned in. Basic, we missed you, bud. You would have brought some valuable insight into this conversation. But as always, guys, appreciate every single one of you. Do me one favor before you sign off. Just hit that like button. If you're new to this channel and you're just discovering this channel, you've made it to the end of an hour and 3-minute long video, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Other than that, guys, appreciate every single one of you, and I'll catch you on the next video.